Okay, today's going to be it's a hybrid video. It's going to be half overview, half tutorial. We're going to basically be starting from a halfway point and we're going to build up a little bit. But the tutorial we're going to be doing is an attachment system where I can press tab, and whenever I press tab, it brings up this kind of attachment system and you can swap it to whatever you want. And if you notice, it even adjusts where to put the sites. So like there's a holographic site. If I go to iron sites, they're like a bit lower, but it's still lined up correctly. I can grab a scope I can buy a scope with some money, switch to that. I can get more money. But the main kind of point of this video, since I had someone suggest this as a tutorial to make, I was like, oh, this is cool. There's not many attachment systems. But I pretty quickly figured out why I think there's not really many tutorials on this. Is part of the system where it's kind of simple, right? Just tab, you go into a menu, select the thing, swap the models. But what you realize as you start to build out a system like that is there's a lot of systems that need to talk to each other in a pretty complex way in order to get it to work. So for example, do you want it to adjust the attachments? You need it to sync between the menu, the player. I'm going to pull up the more complicated version of this here. So here's in the blueprint. And if you notice, there's actually a good amount of, some of this is the recoil system and firing, but a lot of it is the tutorial system, and there's a decent number of functions related to this in order to get it to sync, because you're actually passing a good amount of data between each of your systems. If you're wanting to do this for real, you probably want to set up, I might get into this deeper at one point, but I'm going to do the bare minimum, and I'll show you what we're going to do. You probably want to use structured data and to pass in an attachment system, because you're going to have things like how much does it affect recoil, what sort of sounds should you play. So for example, like if you have a silencer, obviously you want your gun to sound differently when it has the silencer in front versus if it has foregrip. You want it to affect the recoil. Some of these you probably want to affect the damage. The iron sights, is going to affect where you zoom in. You may affect movement speed. Like there's a dozen things that an attachment system can affect. But here's what we're going to make. I even have a money system here. You can buy them, or you can even pick up items in here if you don't already have them in inventory. So I can grab that barrel attachment or the smaller magazine. So the half box and the barrel shroud like that. What we're going to make though is this. So this is just basically the basic tutorial, and you pop up. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one, I think. This is the one we're making. That's the one we're going to work on. And you can select it, but notice some differences here. Like with this one, it knows what attachment you have and it highlights it like that. That's an additional kind of feature you can layer on top of this, but it requires additional code. It requires the player to talk to the UI, and it needs to transfer the data correctly. And there's a lot of little things like that have to be handled elegantly. But the actual raw basics of it are pretty simple. You just get the weapon to go into position and then let you swap. See, this one doesn't even, I can still shoot. This one here has a check, right? So if I go to there and I try to shoot, it doesn't let me shoot. It even checks depending on what state you're in. So I'm trying to bring up the tab when I'm zoomed in. I can't, but I can bring it in there. So an attachment system, even though the basics are quite simple, the amount of things it connects with is what makes these sorts of systems increasingly complex, which I think we can probably build out in a longer series. But what we're going to start with is actually this. This is just kind of the basic first person template. What I've done so far is I have dragged in all the attachment parts. This is actually different than how I imported the attachments in the base project here. The attachments here, if you look, there's a system FBX scene import data. And what this does is it imports the model. I'll show you how to bring it in. You basically do import, you'll find the attachment you want, and you'll select down here FBX scene, and then you can select the FBX from there and import it, and it'll bring up a tab. But if you notice, this imports it as like basically this blueprint. The scale will all be to 100, but it will retain its location. So see its pivot point for each individual model. This is basically what's set up in the Blender scene. And you don't really need that for the attachment system itself, but you do need it, or you not need it, but it's really useful if you have individual attachments lying around on the ground. Because with this one, so for example, this one I imported like you would normally, but look at where the pivot is relative to the mesh. It's way back here at where the center of the model is, and that's true for everything. So if you have like an attachment system where these are scattered throughout the world, this is not going to be any good because it's going to roll strange. So you probably want to import it as an FBX scene or import them individually. We're not going to cover that too much. We are going to just set up the very basic attachment scene. The other thing I've done here is I have just put them in the first person model. There's no functionality here, so press tab. I can shoot, but that's just the basic, you know, the spawn projectile. I'm just shooting it towards the raycast. And then what I've also done is I've put transforms for where I want the widgets to be. So they're going to be screen space. So that's going to be these widgets. I haven't created the widgets yet, but I've just positioned them because I know these positions work pretty well, and we're going to recreate them in this blank project, or half kind of blank project. It's not really blank. But this is kind of a pain just positioning them. So I've done that in advance. And then I've also found the hit point and display point, which is the two locations we want the gun to lerp between. And that is something we'll do in our code. So with that being said, also I'm making this video partly as a thumbnail, not a thumbnail, but like a placeholder. So if you do have questions about the attachment system or individual parts that are more confusing than others, or how you're trying to implement it, I can tailor tutorials, or we can even talk about it on the Discord relative to what you're actually trying to work on. But I want to at least get the conversation started on how this can be done and the different kind of systems that are involved in making a real-time attachment system like this. This is really the code we're going to be doing today. We have a bunch of arrays for the different types of attachments that are possible. We're just going to throw all the things in there. And then we're going to have a few basic functions. Let's see, set attachment function. Yep. And then there's also some widgets involved. So if we go to Sten Gun, there's an attachment button, which is basically this. It has a little bit of code here. And then an attachment widget, which is basically blank, but you can tell it to create a button, which comes in handy. Like we're going to be taking some other shortcuts as well. So notice I'm just casting to the first person character. I realized pretty quickly that as you start adding layers to the system, that gets pretty messy. You kind of don't want to cast to the first person character. An interface is typically more robust. So I'm going to pull up what is this? This is the button. So in contrast, here we go, specific attachment. So it's like this is the code in this button. So you got a bunch more systems. Oh, I guess I am actually casting to the first person. This is when you buy an item, but down here, set name. There's a bunch more data that needs to be stored. Like you kind of want to store what type of attachment is it? Is it a handguard? Is it a muzzle device? Is it a magazine? Whatever it is. This is how to change the color. Adding different attachments. This is the more complex version. Like this is the attachment widget. The one we're going to be doing is just this though, just these two pieces of code, and this one as well. And all this good data here. This is just the tab button. It does these 4 things. We do this. We do this. This. This right here. This is the lerp inside there. Activate attachments. I'll show you these functions real quick. Load in all attachment buttons. This is the set attachment. Or this is the fill attachment. This is the set attachment function here. Okay. So let's recreate it. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do, we're just gonna get the thing to move correctly. So what I like to do is you just press 1, press that, and then you can just do tab. Technically, you probably want to put these in, right, not plugins, project settings, and down here to input and set up an input mapping, or the newer one is, we're not using VR, would be the more advanced input system in Unreal Engine 5. I'm going to create a sequence, just add 2 more since we'll be using those later. And we are just going to lerp the display location. So what we're going to do here, we're going to do once. We are going to need a timeline. We're going to call this lerp weapon point. I'm going to actually do play from start because that's what we want here. We will reset this do once, but we basically don't want it to be spammable. We want it to happen once and only be activatable once we're in that spot again. Okay, the thing we're going to be moving is we're actually just going to move the base weapon. In the more advanced version, I have little here, I'll show you. I make little scene objects and I move this scene object versus the model itself. That's just in case the model has any weird scaling, which it does. It's scaled by 100. I don't want to have to deal with that. So I created basically little scene handles, which is just like this. Scene, you can create those. But this is a simpler version, so we can just move the model itself and we'll be fine. Okay, we will need a Boolean. We don't actually need that anymore, or any of these. Let's just reuse this Boolean. So, and we're just gonna, the Boolean will be a question in display mode. And we will be setting this Boolean here. Once it's finished, we will set the Boolean to whatever it wasn't. So if it's true, we'll set it to false. If it's false, it'll be set to true. So that's what this does right here. However, on update, we are going to be setting set relative location, and let's just look for base, see if that's here. Base 10 gun. Set relative location and rotation. There we go. Now we actually need the location and rotation. That's not too bad though. We can lerp transform. Let's go ahead and split these up since we don't actually need the scale. We just need the location and rotation. I'm going to move this up a little bit. Let's make space so I can zoom in. There's the base 10 gun. And then we need to create a quick, how long did we make this? We made it 0.8 seconds. You can make this however long you want. 0.8 just felt about right. We'll make a float. Add key 0. Time 1 or time 0.8. Value 1, like that. We'll flatten this and then also make it auto. Flatten, there we go. Nice little smooth curve. And let's rename it as well to, press F2, I'm just gonna call it alpha. Okay. And then in terms of the locations, we are going to use this as whatever the current location is. So get relative location, relative rotation. And that's where it is, and now we need a set where we want it. We can put the alpha right there. And where we want it, we will actually, this is where we use this Boolean, because we can basically select, we want this one down here, depending on which one. If this is true, we want to go to the hit point. If it's false, we want to go to the other one. And we can actually copy these two here. Make sure to put this in location, not scale. Scale we can leave blank, since scale of 1 is exactly what we want. Okay. All right. So what this means, let's try it out. The last thing we need to do is reset this so we can do it more than once as soon as it's finished. There we go. Let's see if this works. So if we press tab, it goes to the location and it goes back. So that's the first system. The next system we're going to make is we are going to turn the widgets on and off. But in order to do that, let's first actually make the widgets. We are going to have two widgets. They're kind of nested widgets. So the first one will just be this lay widget. And then the next other one I'll call attachment button. Okay. Display widget is actually the we'll call it attachment widget, just so it's not confusing. Okay, attachment widget is kind of the container where all the buttons will go. So we actually have a fairly simple system. We'll just have a vertical box in here, and we want to center it. I would say center it in the middle of the screen, but this widget isn't actually going to be used on the screen. So you're just going to be centering it to the center of the canvas here. And that's going to be that. Make sure it is a variable, and we can call it something. We'll call it like men's vertical box, like that. And then the only system we're going to need here is we're going to just create it. We can delete all these. We're going to create a custom function called fill widget. Okay. This is where we are going to get player. We'll need the controller because we are going to create widget. And this is where we will create a button, the widget button, which is different than, I'm not talking about, there's like a button here. That's not what we're creating. We're creating this widget that we created, the attachment button. Okay. We actually need to create a function within the button. So let's go ahead and jump over to the button real quick. The button, we are going to need a few items. We will have a horizontal box. This will also be anchored in the center here. Set these to 0.5. And there we go. And this will also be size to content. And then this is where we add the actual button. We'll call it like attachment button. And we'll want some text. Let me double check the attachment button, make sure. Yeah, this should be fine. Some text. There we go. The text, I like to make it just a little bit bigger. Let's do 32. And then I like to put something generic in it so you can kind of tell if it's been filled in correctly. A stroke of 2 is also kind of nice, just so you can read it a bit easier, depending on the background. And we'll call this is just attachment text, just like that. And this, I think, needs to be a variable. Yes. Okay. So we need the attachment text, and we're going to just set text like this, and we're going to create a custom set button name. In the larger, go ahead and grab that. We'll just call this name. In the more complicated version here, this passes more data than the name, since you actually need it for the attachment system to work. So if you look in the button, like set name, I'm passing in the model type, the attachment type, and the name. So all these are needed. But for ours, we just need that, and then we click the button, and then on clicked, we'll do something here where we will get player pawn, and we'll cast to the first person. And assuming this cast worked, we actually need to call a function here. Attachment text, get text, and we need a function in the player. We're kind of looping around, but that's because these systems are so interconnected. That's kind of how you have to set this. Okay, set attachments is what's going to happen here. Let's save and compile this, and then we're going to jump back here, and then we'll just set attachments. And let's make sure in the first person, add in, I think we just call this name. And this needs to be text. Save, compile, and then this should have this. Okay, so this is the button. And then the attachment widget, we will set button name. And this is where we actually need to grab this name, good. And then the last thing we need to do here, kind of want to drag this down. We need to add to okay. Let's see if I can do this. Add like this. Because we want to create the attachment, set its name, and then add it into this widget, the vertical box. We don't just want it on the canvas. Generically, we actually do want it in the vertical box because we want the buttons to be listed. Obviously, if you want to list them horizontally, add it to the horizontal box, but that's just how we have it set up. Okay, so this is the system. Let's actually, oh, I think it's mad since this is not compiled. There we go. Let's actually, I've placed all the widgets, but they're not actually filled in. So let's just grab the attachment widget and let's put these widgets into all this and let's see if this looks right. I think they're all turned off actually. Yeah, see, they're not visible. They're still turned off. I guess there's no, we're not filling them with anything. Let's just put something generic in here just to see if it's working. I'm just gonna like drag a button and throw it in the vertical box. Let's make this button, can we make it big? No. Let's see what this gives us. There we go. You see the little dots, so they're filled, but we just haven't filled the attachment with anything valid. So let's fill the attachment. We're going to create a function for this. It's not an overly complicated function, but our function is going to be called set attachment function, and this is in the player. We are going to need a bunch of variables for the different attachments, so let's start creating those now. We're going to have 2 arrays for every attachment type. So one is going to be the names, which is going to be text. This is going to be a variable. We have 5 different attachment sections, so we're going to have 5 different variable or arrays. So we have the stock, the mag, the site, the barrel, and then finally we have the front, which has like the where you put like the flashlight or there's like a weight that goes on this. Actually, what I'm going to do here, this is a little cheating. I'm going to copy these because I have the names already. I'll show you, I'll list you all the variables so you can see what they do. I'm just copying these variables from the other project. Because there's nothing particularly hard about this. It's just if you get it wrong, because the systems are interconnected, it can be tricky to debug. So let's compile this. So if you look, I just listed whatever I want to call each section, and this corresponds to these, which I need to fill in. So I'll just go through here. Okay, this is the box magazine. I think I labeled my stuff correctly. Yes. So box comes first. One thing you can kind of do is to use the snipping tool and just snip it, so that way you know. So I know the double comes after this. Oh. Okay, double. Snail mag is next. The tray, the belt, half box. Okay. Sights. The iron sights are going to be first. Okay, iron, raised, then hollow sights, and then scope, then IR. Okay, this is the stock. We start with the wire simple. Next one is the folding wire. The next one is the pistol grip. Next one is the wooden. Next one is the single point. Single. Okay, just two more. First one we leave blank because you're allowed to not have any, but you don't have to actually have a barrel attachment. So we need the muzzle brake, then the flash hider, then the foregrip, then the silencer, then the shroud. Like that. Okay, last one. Blank, and then the front. You have the counterweight and the flashlight. There we go. Just like that. Okay. Okay. Just close that snipping image. So we have all our variables now. And we have the set attachment, making our function. This function we're going to be calling it for the different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this again, one more, okay. And then what I'm going to call this one I don't actually want to be an array. This one will just be the name. And this is the names array. This is the models array. And then this is the model to actually set, like that. Okay, there's a quirk here Maybe they have this fixed in newer versions of Unreal, but the contains item works in editor, but it doesn't work on build. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe they fixed that. So I'm actually going to paste in a system that is just this. It's just this code here. Yeah, for some reason it doesn't work on builds. Can't tell you why. Again, it works in editor, and I'm just gonna make this a local variable like that. So keep in mind, all this code, all it's doing is this. Why does it not work that way? Your guess is as good as mine. It was a fun thing to discover as well. Okay. Now that if the thing we're looking for is within this list, basically what we want to do is we want to find it in the model list. So find, not that, another find item. There we go. And we're gonna find it within, we can branch this out. Find it there. And when we find it there, we'll have the index. And what we can do is we can get the index from that. And then now that we know that there, we can set the model. Is this let's see here, what's this called? Set static mesh. Oh, it wants a specific thing, but actually we're gonna plug it. It doesn't like that. Let me check this. Static mesh. This needs to be a static mesh component, like that. If you notice, the only difference here, you can't really see it. There's a little C, static mesh component versus static mesh. So now that we've changed that, I think we should be able to plug this in here. Yep, just like that. And if it's in there, we want to set it. That's all this is doing. The contains code makes this look more complicated than it actually is, but really all we're doing is just seeing, hey, is it in there? If it is, go ahead and set it. And let's go ahead and make our last function, which is even simpler than this one. And this one will be called fill attachment widget. And for this, let's grab names, just like this. And then we also want the widget, so we'll grab that like that. Let's call that widget. I'm gonna move it up. We actually need to get the widget because this is technically over. I'm pointing on my screen. Let me point with my mouse. This is technically a widget component. We don't actually want the widget component. We want the widget. It seems like a semantic difference, but it does actually make a difference here. Since the widget component is the thing in the hierarchy, the widget component, or the widget itself, is actually like the object. And that's what we want. So we want get widget. Does this work? Yeah. It wants to grab it from something, but we're just getting the widget from there. And then we can cast to, again, this is a system where you can use an interface. We're just going to use a cast since it's simpler in this system. And we want to do something for each for every one of these items in the list, we just want to fill the widget. And it wants a name because that's the function we created, right? That is this guy, fill widget. File save, file save. And let's make sure we call this. So we're going to jump back to the event graph. So we want begin play. And we're going to do a quick sequence here. And we're going to do one for every widget type. So one for the barrel, one for the mag, front, sight, stock, like this. Distribute vertically. And we are just going to grab the names for each of them. Can we shift? No, we can't. And then we want to grab in our fill attachment, and we are going to need 5 of these. Okay, distribute vertically like that. Now we need to pair these up, so it doesn't really matter which order as long as they're paired correctly. Okay, so widget name, name widget, name widget, name widget. These are all messed up, so I'm going to select everything and press Q, which lines it all up. And then let's make sure this all gets called. So just to do a sanity check, hey, are these filling up? Let's set these to be visible. If they're not already. Okay, they are set to visible, so let's just play. There they are. They're weird since they're screen space, but when you put your gun out, it looks fine. Okay, so there we go. So we're filling the widget correctly. We technically want to set all these to be not visible, since we are only actually going to set. Let me check something real quick. Okay, so next, the set attachment is the thing that gets called when we actually press the button. This right here. Remember this we created back here? So we pull up our function, and we're just going to basically need the same thing. We can actually just copy these here. But instead of the widgets, what we're going to want is the models. So there's the barrel, there's the front, the mag, the sight, and the stock, like that. And we're just gonna have 5 of these. That's 4. And same thing, since we just want to check all the attachments. If you have the attachment type, you don't actually have to do it for every single one. So look what I have here. This one passes in the attachment type for set attachment, and then it only calls it once, but it calls it for whatever set of attachments it is. We're not doing that. You can do it with an enum and set up a switch. Right, the different attachment types, but what we're going to do, because it does check, it's obviously it runs more than it should, which would be a problem if you have a bunch of attachments, but this isn't too bad. So really all we're going to do here is we're going to do the models, and then we're going to need the model list. If you hold down Control, by the way, that's how you can get right to the Git. And the front. Okay. And then this name, I'm actually going to create a reroute, and because the name will go into all of them. Okay, and now if you select, I'm just going to press Q to straighten everything out. There we go. I'm doing Control like D to line everything up, by the way, in case you want that shortcut. It's listed there, I think. Yeah, see all these controls for alignment. So if you're wondering the shortcuts for that, I like them. It keeps things neater. Okay, let's actually set all the UI to visible, and we can see if this works. Okay, visible, play, and you notice we can click things. I had to tab out because it doesn't go to mouse button, but it is technically working, if you can see that. See? Okay. But let's actually make things display correctly and make the mouse button, which is actually not too hard. It's honestly probably one of the easier parts of what we're doing today. Okay, so that's going to be the other three sections. So the first one, let's get things to turn on and off correctly. So let's just grab all these. Let's just put them in an array. Make array. We'll just do an each for each. And just set visibility. And if we want to toggle the visibility, or actually we can just do in display mode. And it's like, hey, if it's not in display mode, we want it to set whatever's opposite of that. So this should actually, see, turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off. Just what we want. I want to turn off the center crosshair as well. So like that red. I guess it technically gets covered up by one of the buttons, but I'm going to turn it off. So cast to person HUD, get player, get HUD, and we are just going to show HUD. We're going to want to set show HUD though, like that. And we're going to use this display mode just like that. And then the last thing, we are going to set the game into UI mode. So like notice I'm still looking around, I want to stop. So the way I can do that, I'm actually going to create a branch here. And if this is true, we're going to set input game only. And we are going to not want to show the mouse cursor. You have to turn off context sensitive. Set controller turn context sensitive back on. And then we're going to set game UI. And then we are going to also turn on the mouse cursor since we want the mouse cursor for here. So there we go. We have those 4 sections. So now, if you click it, it turns on. We can change our attachments to whatever we want. If we go out, now we have new attachments. Let's add in the box mag. I like the snail mag. Flash hider. And let's do the wooden. And let's do the IR. There you go. See? It's a very simple attachment. This overview / tutorial, very long, very haphazard. I'm trying to find a better way to kind of approach these more complex topics. Obviously, a series of videos was probably not a bad idea. However, I do want things to be accessible, and I'm trying to find that balance of making something that's simple and accessible, but also get into things that people don't talk about much and into these more complex systems that I know there's a demand for. These are the things I wanted to know, and I'll see what I can do to make tutorials about this. This 3D model will be on my Discord. I'll dump it in there. And there will also be more discussion about how to develop these types of systems on the Discord. If you have tutorials you like, either from me or from other people, feel free to share them on the Discord. That's what we're doing there, is trying to learn how to get better at Unreal and just enjoy game development. So that's all for today. Catch you later.